So I can switch to my phone for a second. Dum-da-dum. Can you hear that? Almost surely. Checkity check, check, check. You know, I straight up ordered new audio stuff because I think this is such a horrendous situation. Like, what is the problem? It's an Elgato Wave XLR plugged into a Shure SMB7, like, I don't know, everybody else in the world, plugged into a totally normal Mac computer, but only me has this problem. And I've had 3 Elgato Wave XLRs. It doesn't seem to be that piece of technology because I can swap any of them out and it does it. I've had 3 Shure SM7Bs. It's just that, which is just a stupid amount of money. No, I don't run the Wavelink software. Should I? Is that required? Wavelink. I don't even know. Elgato. There's the Elgato Control Center and the Elgato Camera Hub. I do run the Camera Hub sometimes because I literally have one of those things, like the lighting things. I don't use it that often though, because the lighting in here is fine, right? Look at me in the corner being fine. Yeah, it's just unbelievable to me. My mic cable is dangled perfectly so it doesn't touch any other cable. It's plugged in via a Thunderbolt, expensive USB cable. I've swapped out every piece of this, new audio cables, new everything. It's just like, I'm just gonna stop working. Only when you're streaming though. Works fine on Shop Talk Show, which is funky. So you know what I bought? I bought the Shure not SM7B. That's what this is. SM7 or something. I'm using Ecamm Studio. I bought the Shure one that doesn't need the Wave XLR. So it doesn't need an audio cable either. It's just going to be USB-C in, which feels like kind of a downgrade, but it's a nice mic. I think that's what Dave uses, and I think that simplification might solve this. I'm going to switch back to the Wave and see if it'll take. So check. It seems to have a normal signal, but I don't know if it really does or not. You tell me. I'm back on this one. Yeah. Well, we'll leave it and then worry that it dies. Anyway, before I get started, I want to look at if stuff for sure in CSS because it's pretty cool. But I also want to, on my plate is to just make a real simple Tailwind template that has the basics in place. Like this. I don't know what this website is, Tailwind Flex, but it seems like there's so much Tailwind crap on the web. What I was looking for, it seemed to have, which is just like chunks of HTML with a bunch of Tailwind stuff on it. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to paste it in this template. I can be happy to give it credit too, of course. Oh my gosh, even though this website looks gross, copy, I'll put it in the description here of where it came from. And notice none of these classes do anything, but I am pretty stoked about our Tailwind integration where to trigger Tailwind, you just go import Tailwind CSS, and it's going to be like, oh, I see you're trying to use the Tailwind block. It's going to process the CSS with Tailwind, and it should rock and roll. Look at that. That's the kind of integration we're looking for here on CodePen. That is pretty good looking, I think. So that could be a Tailwind. We could just, I don't know. I'm going to say basic usage of Tailwind, and that should get someone started. Like that's a worthy template, I think. So I'm going to mark it as a template. What I want is, I think it's slightly hard to educate people about this line of code. That if you are on a new pen and you added the Tailwind block from here, you're like, oh, they have Tailwind. I'll click the add to pen button. We don't add this line of code for you. Not yet anyway, because it's not tricky, like not tricky from a technical perspective. We could just do that. But it's like, let's say you had 5 CSS files. Which one gets it? Which one is appropriate to get it? There's just a lot of cans of worms there, really. So what I'd like to do is explain it more through documentation and through things like the information available in the block, which I'm trying to do that here. I have a new thing down here I'm about to deploy that explains how to use Tailwind, as well as just have a template for it. Because I think that solves a lot of issues that if you knew that CodePen supported Tailwind and you are struggling somehow, that just finding another pen that uses it and looking at it is kind of like an escape hatch for that. So I did mark it as a template, right? And then I could put it in, let's see, your work. I can go to my collections to make it kind of an official template. Oh, why is it under my context all of a sudden? I need to be under that context. So official templates, and then I'll add to it, although I should have just done this from the pen itself. So your work, my recently touched pens are here under the create menu. So I can click that and then add it to a collection from here. Add to collection, official templates. And if I look at it, I don't know that I want it. The first 3 here show up as the first 3 when you start a new pen. So if I were to go codepen.io, editor pen, we're showing you a couple of templates here just in case like you don't want the default pen, you want something else. And I'm not sure if Tailwind deserves to be one of those top 3. The classic block does. Maybe I'll put React, Tailwind, and classic. Maybe it does deserve to be in the top 3. I don't know. I'll leave it at that for now, but I'm pretty satisfied with that as a Tailwind pen. Okay, all right. Let's consider that a simple job done here. So yesterday we looked at function, and that's probably worth a review because it was pretty freaking cool. And I think the if function, well, number one, it is a function, so it's related in that sense, but they seem like they're going to be pals at least a little bit, which is cool. So when we are using function allows us to make our own function. CSS already has functions, right? It's got clamp and it's got, I don't know, calc and min and trigonometry ones and attribute and all sorts of stuff. So there's already tons of functions in it. I'd wager over 100 CSS functions, right? But this allows us to create our own that didn't exist before, and you have to use a custom ident to do it, meaning a -- thing, just like custom properties have. I love that. I wish everything had that. I wish your keyframes had it. I wish your everything required it, but it's nice to know, because if you see the double dashes, you mean like, I just made it up. So from like a CSS education perspective, it's like you see the double dashes and it's like, that's something that somebody just made up. It's not a special keyword built into the language or anything. And I find when I look at new languages, it's a little hard to distinguish what's important to the language and what's just like, I don't know, it's just a variable name or whatever. So, okay, negate. And then we looked at this new property, which is the thing that gets returned from the function. Although they don't call it return. Apparently they didn't call it return very much on purpose because it almost like applies an execution order. There is a little bit of execution order, but it's not really execution order, but source order matters a little bit in a function, but not very much. For example, I could override value down here with the value 10 or something, and it's going to screw up this and not honor this one, even though this is declared afterwards or something. It kind of just doesn't matter what the order of the CSS in here it is. The order only matters if there's multiple results. The lower down one is the one that wins, like a margin statement would. Like if you went margin 10 pixels. Now I'm doing this in a function, which is absolutely meaningless. This will return nothing. But you can imagine in some regular CSS, margin 20 pixels is just going to override the 10 because it comes later. The same happens with the result function here. And a function can only return one value. So you use it like, you'd say border and then you'd call a function. You'd say padding and you'd call a function. You'd say background and you call a function. It's the value of something from a property value pair. Kind of cool. And these examples come right from Una. in her blog post, 5 useful functions using the new function rule. We read her blog post yesterday and got through that. So we looked at this one. See how it has padding in the card of 1 rem? Well, the header's in the card too, but we use that same value with a negative value to like suck it back to the edges. I found that pretty cool and satisfying. The opacity of these purple, that's Rebecca purple, but with a little opacity applied, because instead of using the relative color syntax directly, we kind of abstracted it into an opacity function of our own, and we call that, which makes it read a little cleaner. And I agree that it does read a little cleaner. I like that abstraction of that away. I think that's kind of neat. Our opacity function could, for example, manipulate some of the colors a little bit more if we wanted to, or have custom functions. I think that's neat to take this logic, pluck it away from here, which I'm starting to think is like, this is a little bit more of, all CSS you could argue is quote unquote declarative, but this particular chunk is like extra declarative. It's like, this is where I'm just saying the stuff that a header should be. And when there's too much logic in here, it starts to feel like, man, it reads a little nicer to have less logic here and just kind of expressing the meaning of what's happening and move logical stuff away into functions, not changing the universe here, but just kind of neat. This title we put as a pseudo element. I found that kind of neat as a function is maybe like another way of storing something like a string. Not terribly useful, because that would just be the same as a custom property or something. But I was looking at it because I was confused at first, because I was like, oh, mixins could like then expose this variable somewhere else in the DOM, but there's no risk of exposing a variable that you use inside of a function, because the only thing that gets returned is a value. So we had that going on. And then it started, the most interesting, kind of where we left off, was down here in this declarative block. Display grid, it's got a gap. And what are the columns? Oh, well, I don't want to explain the column stuff right here. I just want to say, oh, that's the logic. Just reference this function if you want to go look at the logic for how columns work. It's pretty simple. It breaks from 3 columns to 1 column at a breakpoint here. But isn't that neat? That's going to return whatever is necessary as a valid value for grid template columns. And it's here. So the result is if we just didn't do anything else, it would just return the 3 columns. But this is where it gets extra interesting in a function. So we don't really need math or trigonometry, other logic. What we're trying to do here is have the value resolve depending on a media query. So we change it. Now we have 2 results in the same function, but the lower down one, or the more specific one in this case, works. Actually, I wonder if it's just lower down, or if it's the media will win because of some kind of like pseudo specificity thing. If I put that here, is it functionally the same? No, it's the lower downedness is what matters. Isn't that interesting? Because there's no specificity at work here. This one is just lower down in the function, so it will always win. So the conditional one is always overridden. How interesting. So if you want to override it, you gotta do source order matters. And I guess we figured that out yesterday, right? Because if we undo this, all browsers support color red. It's always going to be two columns, because this one's just gonna win. This one will always win. And I think this is where we could start looking at if, like the title of this stream, is because there's another way to express this. Instead of returning 2 results, even though I think this reads okay, we could use if to do it, I think. But I haven't read or written much if stuff yet. So it's Una, again, on the prowl here. This is back in July, but so Chrome 137, we're in stable Chrome, which I think is 140, so we're good there. It mattered yesterday because the at function was in Chrome 139, but Arc, which I've been trying to use a little bit again because I like the idea that Atlassian dude bought it and he really likes Arc. By dude, I mean like whatever their CEO is or whatever, who obviously okayed that deal, is a fan of Arc. And I feel like if now that they own it, they could, not that I want them to take crazy control over it or anything, but they do control it now. And I'm kind of hoping Arc gets a little breath of life, and I'm happy to ride that train. Okay. Arc is behind in their versions of Chrome. It did not have at function in it, so we had to use Chrome Canary. Or we couldn't use Arc anyway. We used Chrome Canary. We could have used Chrome. But for this, we could technically use Arc, I guess. But whatever. Now we're in Chrome stable. That was too many words to explain something that doesn't matter. So the syntax of it is a property like margin or padding or grid template columns or anything else, if, and then a parenthesis, and it closes the parenthesis, and then a condition colon value semicolon. Condition value semicolon. Condition value semicolon. That's probably going to be important to get in our head a little bit. So if parentheses, condition value. Condition value, condition value. So what does a condition actually look like in this world? Though, do we need this tab open anymore? That was the functions one. I think I'll leave it open for a minute because I do kind of want to reference this in my free time a little bit. So the conditions, there's 3 types of conditions, which are all queries: style queries, media queries, supports queries. I think we understand all those. Style queries is probably the least familiar if y'all don't do that very much, but it's at the moment, or a style query pretty much is checking the value of a custom property at this point, which is fine. So it looks like that. So a condition is either media, supports, or style. So in ours, it's either media, style, or what's the last one? Supports. So that's the syntax there. Cool. So any pointer is fine. You're changing the width of a button if you have a mouse. So if you have a mouse, it's smaller. And if you don't have a mouse, it's bigger. So this is for your finger. This is for your mouse. That's kind of cool. And it's so... like if we took that code and we wrote it not that way, it would look different, right? Let's write some CSS. Let's take Una's code and look at it differently. So instead we'd say width is, I don't know, one of the two, 30 pixels. And then you'd write at media, any pointer, fine, width 44 pixels. So like we've been probably all looking at code that looks like that for a long time, and it reads fine, but like, does that read better? Maybe. It's one thing that it definitely has going for it is that you don't have to repeat width, which is one of those situations where sometimes you refer to that as error prone. Like that can be a bug and you'd be like, what is wrong with this code? It's crazy, you know? It's because you had to repeat yourself and you can do it wrong in that way. That's not a problem up here. I mean, you can get other syntax wrong, but it's just one that doesn't exist up here. Another thing that's interesting is you don't need the @ sign there. You need it here, but you don't here. I could see that tripping people up. And then it kind of has this... I don't know, it like makes my brain think about a ternary operator in JavaScript, but it is not a ternary operator. It's like it's like almost more useful to think of these as line by line like that. And it's always condition value, condition value. Then there's an else, so I guess we should add that to ours. All right, so supports, and then there's always an else, and that can have a value. So if it doesn't match any of these, it gets to the bottom. What happens if none of them match? Do you have to have an else statement? It kind of seems like you don't, but maybe. Let's actually read it, I guess. You can provide an else statement, which is used if none of the other conditions are satisfied. So does it return like null or something if you don't have an else statement and nothing is satisfied? Or is it one of those like it provides like a for sure invalid value so the whole thing doesn't like resolve or however you say that? I don't know. Let's put it into some examples. Okay, we looked at that example as ready. The preceding code is the same as this. Yeah, we just did that same exercise ourselves. Although we nested the media query within button where she broke it out. Interesting, sort of. Using the if format lets you have the logic in line without requiring styling logic in two different places. So yeah, that's what we're looking at there. Inline supports queries. So we're setting a background color only once here. And if the browser supports OKLCH, you get OKLCH. Otherwise, you get a hex code value. Yeah, that makes sense to me. It is weird to look at. But the fact that you're just saying background color and then you express the logic there is cool. And honestly, you could extract this if logic into a function if you wanted to. That's why I thought it was warranted to do the review. So if we stole Una's CSS exactly as it is, look at that, it actually does something. I don't want to mess with that just right now. I just want to focus on this if statement. You could extract the if, I think, into an at function. So you could go at function, site background. Oh, you have to do the custom ident, right? Site background is a function and it returns, but you don't say return, you say results is this. Merp. And then here, when you're trying to set the background color, you just go site background with the quotes. Is that going to work? Yeah, it's going to work exactly the same. So when I was, looking at this code, it's like, oh, right on the body, there's so much logic and stuff there. That's what I was just saying about functions, is that like removing the logic from this kind of declarative piece is just kind of neat. It could be clean. I could see it being clean. That way, when you look at this, you're like, oh, I see. It's a function. And if I really need to go look at that function, I could go do it. It reminds me of something like, I wonder if VS Code is already smart about it. Like you should be able to option click that and jump right to it, no matter what file it's in or whatever, like a TypeScript situation. All right, so that's pretty interesting. Should I comment it out for now? I could just leave it in there, I guess. Cool. With this code, you get, whether your browser supports it or doesn't support it as a pseudo element. Since our browser supports it, we get that. That's kind of neat. Visualizing UI state. So it's getting a little bit more complicated. You can use if for state-based styling. For example, if styling progress cards based on their UI state, pending or complete. Okay, so pending or complete is just arbitrary states. We're familiar with them, but they're not specifically meaningful to CSS. They're just examples of states that an element could be in. Store the status in a data attribute here, which is valid, and then apply. Okay, so the status is we're going to pull that value off of this. It has a custom ident. You'd think it would be of type string. I wonder what if that string would work too, but whatever. And then if the style of that thing is exactly pending, which looks like a string to me, then make it blue. If it's complete, make it green. Otherwise, fall back to gray. And then so the border and the background are different if statements. Pretty cool. And then you get this stuff going on. So if you were, if this CSS existed in your app, the like JavaScript developer or PHP developer or whatever, just put the right data status on there and the colors will align nicely. And there's not all kinds of different classes for it. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could write this. So I guess what we're evaluating is like, do we like it like this? Kinda? I think so. I mean, there's some design system implications here, because when I think of data attributes and states, I think, that's kind of like it's like a prop for a component. It's like a way of expressing the state that it's in. And this is, I don't know, this is nice, I guess. I could see myself sort of writing it. It seems like the custom property usage is like a little optionally here or something. I don't know. It seems weird, but I do like it. With a style inside of an if function, you can directly style the element you are targeting. No need for a parent element like CSS style queries would require. Oh, so a style query normally requires, you can't check the style on the thing that you're styling. And this gets around that. With style inside of an if function, you can directly style the element you are targeting. It seems like that's a big line in this blog post. This is normally container queries, of which style queries are a part of. You need to have that 1 degree of like DOM separation. It has to be a child element that you're styling, and that doesn't. See, that's a big deal. I wish I could like leave a note. Read this. This demo shows how a basic case of you can use if to support a new architectural approach to CSS. See, that seems like a big deal too, right? These things unlock not ways where there's no other way to do it before, which is true of all sorts of other stuff. It's just like how you approach the architecture, which can be equally important, really. One benefit of using a CSS custom properties over classes is the ease of updating them in CSS. For example, they could be updated using media queries or hover states, such as hover. Lovely. The addition of if provides a new architectural opportunity for CSS developers as technologies like style queries evolve. Evolve meaning style queries should be able to check more than custom properties. Range querying will likely be possible within if functions, meaning like if the style, if a value is less than 10, do this. If it's over 20, do this, that kind of thing, which we probably can't quite do with the style query yet. They will also be useful when combined with upcoming functions, the at function rule. Yeah, so they definitely combine. We saw an example of that yesterday with Bramis's idea of a light dark function that does more than just color does. Hello, Mr. Kick 808. Normally light dark, the built-in one, not the custom ident one here, takes 2 values, but they have to be 2 colors. Whereas this is like working with any 2 values. Could be a size or who knows what all. Font, line, letters, spacing, who knows? But we're seeing them together here. We're seeing an at function and if together, and it's reacting to the custom property that would be, I guess, evaluated at where you're calling the light dark function from. Interesting. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready to deal with that comment though. It looks like a little inception stuff. So I set the scheme to like, this is how you would do it. Oh my gosh, the scoping is going to freak me out too. But it's like any element that has this attribute on it, that becomes the scope. And then you're selecting it with this selector, although you're applying a little specificity when you're doing it. Scheme from the attribute. You pull data scheme off of it, which would be light or dark, I guess. Or what is they? Does he have some example HTML we can see? Yeah, it'll be light or dark. So this is light or dark. If it's system, it does root scheme, which is dark or light, depending on the prefers, which is nice. So this is combining the media preference too, which is nice. It's like honoring that if you pass in system. Otherwise, it respects the attribute. Man, that is a little mind-bending, but I like it. It's like use what you pass in. And also, one of the possibilities is the system one that's just like respect whatever. Like I can override it, but please respect whatever. That's great. That's really neat. It's a little more mind-bending than I want it to be. But so I guess that's if and functions together. It doesn't seem like they always need to be together, but I guess there's like I almost want to make a markdown file quick, right? Thoughts.md. There's like this 4-step thing we went through yesterday, or the 3-step, and the 4th step would be using an if function. And it looked like this. So if I made 1, the step could be, let's say I have a grid. And inside that grid is display grid and then grid template columns 3, and then we're going to do the thing that we've been doing for a million years. We'll say media. We'll use the new syntax though. Width is less than 500 pixels. Grid template columns 1FR. So that's like where we start, and there's really nothing wrong with that. People will write that for a long time to come. If we're going to abstract that a bit in the great wide world, we could write it like grid. We could go calls, right? Now it's a media query. So we say display grid, and we say grid template columns var calls. Then we still do the media query, but we don't change grid template columns, we change calls. And this has like a little bit of value in that we don't have to redeclare grid template columns, which has a little bit of error proneness to it. So that's this, like, maybe an improvement or another way to approach this in CSS. Then we have another way. And that is where we say display grid, and we say grid template columns, and then we're going to call columns as a function. So we're going to declare the function as calls, and it's going to, the result of that function is 1FR, 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 except for we're going to do this inside of the function. And its result is going to be 1FR. So now we've kind of abstracted the logic out to this function instead. Okay. And then number 4 that we can add today is to start here, but instead of 2 results, the result becomes an if statement. So if, and then how would we write that if statement? I think we'd have to go media width is less than 500 pixels, and then the colon. That, when that's the case, it's just 1FR, semicolon, else it's the 3 columns. So it's kind of like reverse logic, I guess, but okay. And then we just call columns here. So four ways to do the same thing. We could almost have a vote. Like a friggin' Blue Sky poll, or what? Does Blue Sky have polls yet? I don't even know. But it would be a little bit like that. Which do you like the best? Kick likes number 2. I'm certainly most comfortable with 1. 2 I'm starting to get more comfortable with, and it seems like the advantages are thin to 2. 3 is like 1 in that it has this override thing. And 4 just has the 1 result, which I get theoretically makes it easier to read. Which one will shake out 10 years from now? What will people write more of? Probably 1. I don't know. That's interesting. That's almost a little blog post all in itself. Like, if we had all these features, which would you do? Is there any more we could add? Are those just the 4? I guess there's like one alt, which is that you don't nest it, which is like almost definitely worse. But not everybody has that in their brains yet, that you can nest it there. And like, I think the browser support is probably fine, but then it has to look like this. And I think that's relevant of saying, because it has the same problem where you're repeating stuff. Now you're repeating the selector, and we almost sure that people don't like to do that. You know, that sucks that it's repeated, and that sucks that it's repeated. There's two repeateds in there. So people actually write it with the nesting. Maybe that's worth being like, that's 1. This is 2. It makes it less of an interesting vote, though, because now absolutely nobody is going to vote for 1, right? Nobody actually likes that. I mean, maybe it's worth it. Maybe there's some crazies, and so this becomes 3, 4, and 5. Is anybody watching? All one of you? No, there's at least 3. Hello. Does anybody actually like that? I mean, I get technically the browser support is the very deepest on 1, so you could like it on that grounds. Anyway, I think we will leave it. Let's see. If seems like something I'd want to use a lot and modified it, but that's why I like the var way. You know what's not represented here is like this isn't the best usage of functions or if, because it's, you know, it's so basic. We're not even using any parameters or arguments. That is a big deal. I think functions, like argumentless functions, are probably a lot less useful generally than ones that take arguments and like do stuff with the arguments. They can even take typed arguments, which seems really cool. The other thing we didn't explore is like what happens if neither of these happen. And I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, we could test it real quick, but I think if you just, if it doesn't match anything and if it's just not going to do anything, I don't even think it's worth testing. Of course, it doesn't do anything. Chase says, like if you had multiple rules for an app media rule, maybe I'd use one. Yeah, that if becomes more useful the more of them you have. So if you had 5 breakpoints, that becomes like nicer to look at. Like if this was and you had a bunch of them, that becomes easier to look at. Yeah, maybe. Bali, hello, thanks for showing up. If there's some more classes, I think some people like putting them all in one media query. Yeah, perhaps. And we also proved yesterday that you can't use an argument inside the media query, which just sucks. I'm almost sure you can't here, although maybe because it's not really a media query. It's not an app media query. It's just a thing. Ooh, should we try that? I think this is worth trying. Then I gotta go. But let's try the column logic where this is just bogus code, right? We need to temporarily comment all of this out, but it's hard to do a block. You know what? Do we have a key command for this? Is it option shift slash? No. Control shift slash? Control option slash? Nope. We might have one. Let's see if I can find it. What I want to do is double slashes on every line. Oh, that's not going to work anyway because this is just CSS, not SCSS. There's just no clean way to just do this. I'm just going to move it onto my thoughts document for a minute. Dash, dash, dash. You go down here. But what I want is column logic, and I want to see if a media query will work. So if we took a BR, like a breakpoint, I'll just be more specific, breakpoint, and then had the result, and the result is an if statement. Goish. And the if statement has a media in it where the width is less than the var breakpoint. Will that work? Colon. I don't know how we're going to know. Let's not call it column logic. Let's call it like test. And this returns red. Right? And then the some element, I guess the grid is fine. The background color is test, but we're going to pass the value of 500 pixels. This is totally not going to work. How is it blue again? Why is the background? No, that's not going to work. that's happening here, right? This site background color, but this whole area would be over it. So if the breakpoint was, if the width is bigger than 500 pixels, this should return red, and the background color of the grid should be red, and it's not working. So we've proved that media queries, even in this special format, not the @ sign media format, it doesn't work. You just can't do it. We kind of expected that, but I'm just gonna maybe preserve that. Nope. Can't use variables in this media format either. Okay, fine. Cool. Alan says, it'd be cool if you could hoist the comments so the internal one gets a token. So whatever you had can get the full comment and then flip back to the token when you undo it. Hoist the comments. Yeah, weird sentence. I don't know if I fully get it. Flip back when you undo it. Oh, I see what you mean about commenting. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like if I select all this and comment to us, it's going to be all busted. See, like that lives on because of the other internal comments. There's probably some way to do this. It's fine in JavaScript and CSS and stuff that support the double slash syntax because that wipes out whatever line. Yeah, but not happening here. Okay, so a little bit less useful. That will evolve someday, and I'm sure we'll be all excited about it right here on this stream. So that's cool. Ultimately, I'm hoping to like clean up these demos and make them more available. I am trying to work on a blog post about like stuff you should know about CSS in 2025. It's a little bit of a trite blog post idea, but the idea is like there's a lot of it. And if I make each demo a pen that's just really trimmed down, like, look, this is how you use it, that it will actually be like a great reference blog post. So some of these streams lately have been like, well, I want one for function. I want one for if. I want one for, what's the first one we did? I don't know. If view transitions is on there. What was the hardest one that I started? Oh, the animate to auto stuff that we did on Monday. That pen turned out great. I think there's 4 really clear examples on how to use it. So, okay. Thanks for hanging out. See you tomorrow. Thanks, friends.